This chat bubble is brought to you by Netflix. For a free 30-day trial, head over to netflix.com/GamebreakerTV. Now today I am thinking about games that you would use to get a non-gamer into gaming. So obviously this depends a little bit on the person. So kids are going to probably want something that might be aimed at them, probably not anything rated too high, nothing too gory, and perhaps nothing too complicated. But of course that totally depends on the kid. It depends on their age, it depends what you consider a kid, it depends on your own children or your friends' children or the people you're thinking about. We're all people, kids included. That's just a general sort of guideline. But let's think for a moment about people who are of your own age. So whatever age you are, people of your age, what do you think would be a good game to get them into gaming? So it seems to me that there's a few criteria to consider, and if you disagree with me, do let me know in the comments in the article below. So here's my thoughts on this. Complication, I reckon that's probably a bad thing. Blizzard Entertainment, for all their sins, have a motto of easy to learn, hard to master. And I think this is actually a good way to go. I think it's good if something is relatively straightforward to get into, because that's where the initial interest comes from. If something's really hard just to even learn how to execute, then that is going to be very off-putting for people who are just getting into gaming, because they're just going to think, wow, I'm really awful at this. And that's not fun. It's not fun for people to think that they're bad at something that they're trying to learn. It's good to feel that you're able to do it. I mean, even if you're just able to do a little, even if you just get a vague grasp of something, that makes it more fun than complete feeling of hopelessness. The other big thing that us gamers are dealing with a lot is stigma. So I know that on the other side of the Atlantic from me, there's a huge problem with this at the moment, with various politicians going on about how video games cause violence, it's an ill in society. There's investigations, there's been a ton reported on this by our very own Tori McGrath, so do check out the links in the article below for more on that. But I think that stigma is, even over here in the UK, stigma is a big deal when people are getting into gaming. There's definitely elements of people thinking that gaming is not something that ordinary people do. Gaming is something that geeky people do, that nerdy people do, that isn't very cool, it isn't very sort of fun, it's kind of an undesirable thing. So there's definitely still that stigma. So what can you do about that? I personally think that actually the Wii is really good for removing stigma about games. You see them played in groups and adverts, and it's always people, it's not young kids, and it's not just men, it's groups of families, it's men and women, it's older people, younger people, and there's this social feeling about it that makes a Wii look more like a board game than a computer game, and that's really good for removing some of the stigma. So that's definitely a good place to start. However, if you're looking to get people into PC gaming or even a more serious console like an Xbox or a PlayStation, then you might have another hurdle to get over. So getting them into gaming on the Wii and then getting them into gaming off the Wii. So other than that, what type of games would you choose? I mean, I always thought that adventure type games and RPGs are good, and games such as Oblivion is a good example. That I've actually got a few people into gaming by starting them off with Oblivion, even now, and it's quite an old game. But I think there's a lot there, but it's easy to have fun just scratching the surface. Like, there's enough to do that isn't super complicated, that you've got achievable goals to shoot for. And WoW is another game that's like that. But if anything, what we were talking about earlier with stigma is even worse with WoW than it is with any other game, just because it gets a lot of press coverage and it doesn't have a great reputation. It's sort of often one of those things that younger people play. So I was trying to get a friend of mine's aunt into it, and she was saying, oh gosh, I couldn't, my friend's 12-year-old son plays that game, that's so sad. And well, I guess that if that's how you judge games, then that would be a problem for you. But I think RPGs are good. If you can get over that stigma, RPGs are a good way to go. And sort of games which don't have too complicated a premise to them. I mean, I've always going on about how great Portal is. I think Portal is a good game. I've got a few people into gaming through Portal as well. Just because it's simple to grasp what you're meant to be doing, but the actual puzzles themselves are relatively complicated. And it starts off easy, which is a great thing. One other thing I found with getting people into gaming is that people who are trying to get into gaming at the moment, WASD movement, they have a real problem with that. And I find it really interesting because it's kind of one of those retro gaming things, like movement, yep, WASD, fine, done, all over it. But people who are more recent arrivals, who are used to particularly thumb control stuff on phones, and just generally not WASD keyboard movement. They are struggling a bit more with that, and I think that could be something to shy away from. So games with mouse movement, excuse me, if possible. And another thing that I found people don't like when they're new into gaming is having to aim. And yes, mark of a noob, they are noobs. That's what they are. You can't help that. So avoid games which have aiming. So games where you have to aim your gun or aim your spell, aim your attacks, etc., etc. Those are my top tips. So what do you think? What are your tips? What do you think is the sort of key to getting people into gaming who aren't gamers already? And any specific games that come to mind? Any specific ideas? Do you think my tips are good, or do you think I'm talking nonsense? It happens a lot. So do leave a comment in the article below, and as always guys, keep it locked and dialed to Gamebreaker TV for all your gaming needs.